The hose hums, the air compressor kicks on. A technician steps into a space no larger than a walk-in closet, armed with a spray gun and surrounded by chemical vapors. The protective suit is bulky. The respirator hisses with every breath. In just a few minutes, that space will be filled with expanding foam insulation, an efficient solution to energy loss, but also a cocktail of hidden dangers. Spray foam insulation has revolutionized the building industry. It seals tight spaces, improves energy efficiency, and installs quickly. But it comes with serious risks: chemical exposure, heat buildup, confined space complications, flammability, and equipment failure. And most of those hazards are invisible until something goes wrong. In 2021, a spray foam worker in Texas was hospitalized after collapsing inside a sealed attic. He was wearing a respirator, but the cartridges hadn't been changed in weeks. The air was thick with isocyanates, toxic chemicals commonly found in spray foam products. The attic had no mechanical ventilation. He radioed that he felt dizzy. Minutes later, his partner found him unconscious, slumped between rafters. The warning signs had been there: the rising heat, the stale air, the odor of solvents growing stronger. But none of it was unusual enough to set off alarms. That's the danger of normalized risk. And in the spray foam industry, the line between routine and hazardous is razor thin. Let's talk about what to watch for in spray foam insulation work. Where PPE is essential, ventilation is non-negotiable, and every shift brings potential exposure to invisible threats. In Alberta, a two-person crew was applying closed-cell foam to the basement walls of a new home. Midway through the job, the temperature inside the space spiked due to inadequate airflow. The sprayer began sweating inside his suit, wiping fog from his face shield with a gloved hand. In doing so, he smeared uncured foam onto his skin. He didn't notice at first. Hours later, he developed painful blisters and chemical burns on his cheeks and neck. The team had extra wipes and PPE on site, but no one thought to stop and reassess. The pace of the job overshadowed the risk. Chemical exposure is the #1 concern in this industry. According to the CDC, exposure to isocyanates can cause asthma, severe skin irritation, and long-term respiratory illness. Even in workers with proper gear if decontamination is skipped or equipment fails. In Ireland, a spray foam contractor suffered a life-altering lung injury after repeatedly using the product in poorly ventilated crawl spaces. He had never been formally trained on airflow requirements. When his symptoms began, tight chest, wheezing, fatigue, he assumed it was seasonal allergies. By the time he sought help, the damage was permanent. He now advocates for stronger training standards, but the industry remains largely underregulated in many regions. In some cases, it's not the chemical, but the conditions. In Florida, a sprayer's Tyvek suit tore as he knelt over a joist. The rip wasn't noticed until cleanup. His forearm, exposed to foam vapors, broke out in hives. A closer inspection revealed the suit had been reused across multiple jobs and had micro tears along stress points. The company's policy allowed reuse until visible damage occurred, but no one was actually checking. It wasn't malice, it was momentum. Heat stress is another overlooked hazard. The foam curing process releases heat, and in tight spaces this heat compounds with ambient temperature, raising risks quickly. In Australia, a sprayer passed out in a partially insulated attic. His cooling vest had been left in the truck. The attic was 38 degrees Celsius before he even started. By the time EMS arrived, his core temperature had spiked to 40.2 degrees Celsius. Heat, sweat, gear, fumes, it all adds up. Equipment failure can make everything worse. In Michigan, a spray gun's trigger jammed mid-application, releasing an uncontrolled stream of foam. The operator panicked, twisting to shut off the feed valve, and slipped on the freshly applied material, dislocating his shoulder. The relief valve had been sticking for weeks, but hadn't been replaced. That's the pattern in this trade. Hazards aren't usually sudden, they're gradual. A missed inspection, a worn part, a shortcut taken, until it isn't fine anymore. Noise is also a factor. Compressors, air purging, generators. They drown out verbal warnings. In a small renovation project in New Zealand, a helper stepped into the application zone without PPE, thinking the sprayer had paused. The warning yell wasn't heard over the equipment. She inhaled unfiltered isocyanates and was treated for acute chemical exposure. Communication in high-noise zones must be visual. Hand signals, signage, lights. Yet many crews still rely solely on shouting. Let's not forget training. In South Africa, a subcontractor hired 2 day laborers to prep insulation areas. Neither spoke the same language as the sprayer. One was instructed to wipe overspray from door frames, but used solvent-soaked rags without gloves. He suffered chemical absorption through the skin and eye irritation. No one had walked him through the risks. He didn't even know what product was being used. Language barriers, rushed onboarding, lack of certification. These are not minor issues. They are foundational safety failures that ripple through every layer of the job site. When a worker cannot read a safety label, when a new hire isn't shown how to properly fit a respirator, or when a laborer is handed a solvent with no explanation in a language they understand, the risk isn't theoretical, it's immediate. These gaps often go unnoticed until a preventable injury occurs. It's not enough to assume understanding. Visual communication, translation, and mentorship are essential. In a trade this high risk, clarity is not a luxury. It's a life-saving standard. So what should we be watching for? Respirators that haven't been fit tested, suits reused too many times, lack of decontamination areas, teams working without a ventilation plan, crew members skipping cool-down breaks, workers rubbing their eyes through fogged visors, chemical odors getting stronger, spray guns sputtering, teams yelling over compressor noise, gaps in language or comprehension, and the biggest red flag of all, when nobody pauses to ask, should we stop and reassess? And what about the positive signs? Teams that stop for stretch and hydration breaks, supervisors who inspect gear before every shift, crews using buddy systems to verify PPE, clearly marked air extraction systems, whiteboards listing spray zones and re-entry times, laminated cards showing symptoms of chemical exposure in multiple languages. In Quebec, one company introduced a pre-job ritual. Each team member touched their respirator, suit, gloves, and boots while saying safe to start. It was corny, and it worked. Missed gear checks dropped dramatically. In British Columbia, a firm began requiring GoPro reviews of spray sessions, not for discipline, but for learning. Crews watched footage and identified improvement opportunities together. It became a team sport. And in Germany, a government-funded initiative developed visual safety posters specifically for insulation crews. Simplified, multilingual, and laminated. Injury rates dropped where they were used consistently. Because spray foam work doesn't leave room for casual mistakes, the risks are real, even when they are invisible. The next time you see a sprayer gearing up, or step into a newly insulated room, think about what went into that space. Who checked the gear, who monitored the airflow, who stayed alert under a mask and suit in 35-degree heat. Thank you for watching and welcome to the Safety Smart HQ community. If you've worked in spray foam insulation or seen a close call on a job site, share your story in the comments. Your insight could help prevent a serious injury, or worse. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode where we'll shift focus to safety observations in the armed forces, starting with the Navy, where danger comes from both routine and the ocean itself. Stay sharp out there.